Freedom flight. That was the phrase that was used when Harry and Meghan left the United Kingdom in 2020. It had a certain feel, the notion of two people running away from something big and confining, of breaking free from an institution that hadn't, in their telling, kept them safe. Exchanging the weight of centuries of royal obligation for the comparative warmth and openness of California. It worked as a story for at least a sizable part of the world's audience in 2020. It worked in the story. People was the Oprah interview coming up, the Netflix documentary, the memoir, the departure felt like the beginning of something. The phrase has a different look 5 years later. Frogmore Cottage is undergoing refurbishment, not to welcome them back, to erase what they left behind, so it is said. The last traces of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are being wiped out of the British royal family. And this is so much more than the loss of their old home. The rooms are being returned to their pre-Sussex state, the £2 million of royal-funded refurbishment being painstakingly undone. The changes are being reversed. And on top of that, the fact that even Prince Andrew, who needs somewhere to live and has fewer options than most, took a look at Frogmore and decided it was not for him, according to one source. Freedom Flight encounters an empty house being renovated back to something that predates it. This is the picture in 2025. And a source quoted in royal commentary this week said even Prince Andrew was offered the property and refused to move in. The place has been sitting empty for 3 years now, and even Andrew didn't think it was fit to live in, they said. A huge blow-up and a big fight over Harry's plans for summer back to the United Kingdom, including maybe spending time at Balmoral and reconnecting with the King. A freedom flight and a cottage that nobody wants, two things side by side. Not the most dramatic image in the Sussex story, but probably one of the most accurate. We're going through all of it tonight, what's alleged to be going on at Frogmore and what the specific renovation choices seem to be saying. The Geneva appearance and the details that hogged the coverage for all the wrong reasons. Why the security legal battle matters as much as it does. The Project Thor reconciliation theory and why it keeps running into the same structural wall despite persistent coverage. The tension between Harry's reported desire to reconnect and the operational reality of the Sussex brand's needs. And the question that runs through all of it, whether the freedom that was promised as a substitute for royal living actually delivered what the original premise promised, and at what cost. So let's start at Windsor, because that's where the physical story is playing out right now, at Frogmore. Before discussing what is said to be happening now, it is worth stating clearly the specific history of the cottage. Harry and Meghan moved in as working senior royals and the changes they made. Modern, light-filled, and all reports suggest in some way personally shaped by Meghan's participation in the design decisions. Funded by the institution at a reported cost of about £2 million. It was a home she had invested in aesthetically and emotionally in every description of that period. The kitchen alone became a touchstone when people spoke about Meghan's domestic taste. There was no small amount of work involved in that estate. It was deliberate and it was personal. It seems that The Sun has revealed that the property is being assessed to see if it can be divided again into multiple residences and basically to erase every single trace of Harry and Meghan on the property. And that is really interesting. The property was vacant for a long time after they left. Eventually, Charles asked them to leave and the keys were returned to the Crown estate. Since then, the cottage, unrenovated, unoccupied, empty, sat there, in the words of multiple published accounts. And now, according to reports circulating around royal commentary, the royal household is not simply leaving it empty or putting it up for sale. Resources are being spent, it is claimed, to reverse many of the changes made during the Sussex years. Utilities upgraded, interiors redesigned, bespoke additions reportedly all being reversed as part of plans to return the property to previous layout as several staff homes, which is what it was before the Sussexes moved in. But it is not the renovation that has drawn the most comment, but the detail. Refurbished properties, altered uses, reversing what was done, going back to what was there before the Sussexes arrived, spending money to remove, not add. What the royal watchers have been reading is the specific direction of the renovation. To its supporters, it is pragmatic property management. The cottage was always staff accommodation before being converted for royal use, and there is operational and financial sense in returning it to that function. To critics, the choice to actively pour money into reversing Meghan's design decisions instead of just redecorating around them feels much more deliberate. Of course, there was a lot of criticism as to what Harry and Meghan, let's say, did. Soho House, of course, was involved, so they had to add a yoga room, a £5,000 copper tub, and all these sort of things. I remain utterly perplexed by Meghan Markle's fixation with Soho House. I feel like I need to stay there one time, and maybe, just maybe, I will understand, but I doubt it. With every change reversed, it adds to the feeling that the royal household wants Frogmore to stand for something completely different from the Sussex era. Not neutral, not just up to date, but pre-Sussex, specifically and intentionally. And then there's the Andrew thing. Prince Andrew is understood to have been offered Frogmore as a possible alternative to Royal Lodge, while the future of the latter was being discussed. No, he said. It is difficult to dismiss the quality of the observation made by one source that the place had been vacant for 3 years, and that even Andrew hadn't thought it fit to move into. It just gets something right. Frogmore is not only empty, it is not wanted by the people who would most benefit from having somewhere to live. It's an unusual position for a property on the Windsor estate, and it's become one of the more quietly cutting details in the ongoing conversation about what Frogmore now represents. If Royal Box is showing you the real story behind the headlines, the like button is right there. It allows us to reach the people who are looking for this type of analysis. Now let's consider Geneva, because the Geneva appearance is a case study in the gap between intention and outcome that keeps recurring in Sussex public relations. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are being rubbed out of Frogmore's history. Meghan was in Geneva and spoke to the World Health Organization. Supporters said it was a major chance to address global health policy at the highest institutional level, and the speech itself was covered in a way that recognized the platform it represented. Critics have zeroed in on 2 surrounding details that have persisted in the weeks since. First, there's the crowd. One journalist who reportedly attended said attendance was far lower than expected. The description that gained the most traction, for good reason or not, was that there were just enough people present to fill a British phone box. That line passed through royal commentary efficiently and became one of the most repeated characterizations of the look. The World Health Organization is a major institution, and the event was scheduled formally. Whatever the speech, the criticism is the pointed version of the crowd-sized question that appears in the coverage. It was easier to speak to the observable reality of the room than the policy substance of what was said within. The second thing is the picture. Meghan was pictured with a foreign health official who has previously been publicly criticised for reported comments. But critics argued that if the Sussex brand had the professional communications operation that it requires, standard background checks would have been run before that photograph was allowed to happen. The criticism was not about the meeting. Officials attend multilateral events regularly. It was about whether the layer of vetting that would normally keep a cringeworthy photograph at bay was doing its job. Both criticisms ultimately rest on the same basic observation. To work outside the system of the palace is to work without the multiple review layers that formal royal engagements have. There's a checkpoint for every major royal engagement: communications, logistics, security, diplomatic protocol. Those checkpoints are replaced by whoever is in the room making decisions real time, outside of that structure. Actually, the house was really the residence of several members of staff, and was subdivided into a number of sections at first. So there was a process undertaken to redo the property, to make it go from a multiple family residence to a single family place of residence. And of course, this was to the tune of millions of pounds. Considering some of those structural changes, these sorts of things I'm sure were needed to upkeep property. One missed detail can become the headline that defines coverage of an event that was supposed to be about something else entirely. Subscribe to Royal Box and share your thoughts below. Do you think the Geneva appearance was net positive or a missed opportunity for Meghan? Now to the security debate. Due to security is the issue that has quietly grown into the gateway to everything else in the Harry-United Kingdom relationship, and it is consistently underreported within that specific framing. Much of the coverage of Harry's legal battle over security has been about the legal arguments themselves, what protection he is entitled to, what the Home Office's duties are, and what precedent the court rulings set. That's one way to frame it, but it tends to obscure what's more practically significant. The security issue is not just whether Harry is safe for a particular visit. The question is whether the conditions are there for the relationship between Harry and his country, and by extension his family, to be anything other than it is. Harry has told friends he does not feel comfortable travelling to the UK because of safety fears. He has faced legal challenges against the Home Office over security arrangements, something that has been well documented. Multiple hearings, contested rulings, and ongoing appeals that have taken up much of his legal team's time and of his own public statements. He says there is a threat to him and his family, whether he is a working royal or not, and the withdrawal of protection on the basis of institutional status rather than personal threat is not a proper security policy. Critics are less generous. The argument from that side is that the level of protection Harry is requesting is a reflection of the specific threat environment that comes with being a senior working member of the royal family. An institutionally self-generated threat level and the public profile that the institution provides. Drop that role and the calculus changes. The Crown still has a duty to protect its British citizens, but giving a certain level of protection associated with active royal duties is another matter. The courts have not settled this to Harry's satisfaction. The strategic significance in the current context is not the legal argument, but the practical consequence. Security is the door to everything else. If the security issue is settled, longer trips to the UK become structurally feasible. Attendance at gatherings with relatives, extended time with King Charles during what is now acknowledged as a health situation of genuine seriousness. The kind of unofficial interactions that might allow relationships to repair themselves gradually, rather than through formal, arranged encounters. All of those things hinge on Harry's perception that he can enter the nation securely and without the ongoing burden of overseeing the large-scale logistics of private security. Because it has nothing to do with security, every time a development in the security dispute is reported, it receives excessive attention in royal commentary. It has to do with whether the gateway opens. The remainder of the reconciliation discussion is essentially theoretical until it does. Let's now discuss reconciliation, because the idea that quiet progress is being made behind the scenes has been resurfacing with renewed vigour, and it is important to carefully consider what the evidence does and does not support. Over the course of the last 18 months, the reconciliation theory has emerged in a number of forms, all of which have been amplified by the same Project 4 reporting frame that we have thoroughly discussed on this channel. It has been around long enough to establish a rhythm of its own. A story that suggests progress is published by a friendly outlet. The sourcing is questioned by a critical outlet, and the commentary community as a whole splits along the lines that existed prior to the story's publication. The stories are delivered on time. The observable reality does not change to match them. There is no meaningful reunion, no public censure, no settlement of the legal disputes, and no discernible progress toward the kind of reconciliation that the friendlier media consistently portrays as imminent. Boshoff and Frolick's assessments that the palace's true interior view is significantly colder than the published narrative suggests have repeatedly challenged it, while friendly sources within the Sussex circle have continuously given it oxygen, pushing it into the press. There is still conflict between those two readings. Simply put, both sides have continued to cover it. There hasn't been any notable reunion or public criticism, despite the observable reality. This is the general line of reasoning put forth by some royal commentators. Harry has made public remarks on a number of topics, most notably anti-Semitism, where the timing or framing seemed to correspond with themes that King Charles was highlighting at the same time. Those overlaps are not accidental, according to proponents of this theory. Before making any more significant actions, they advise the father and son to coordinate quietly, test the waters, and use a number of subdued public cues to gauge response and prepare the ground. The counter-argument is that the overlaps are precisely what they appear to be. Two individuals who appear in the same news cycle on related topics and who have a similar background, family, and general moral intuitions. Both of them are closely and thoroughly covered. Any two individuals under observation at that level of intensity will show clear patterns. The evidence that is currently available does not address whether those patterns show coordination or just reflect shared values between two individuals from the same household. The simpler version of the image is what the majority of commentators concur upon. Charles wants to see his son, according to several accounts and evidence of his own reported behaviour over a number of years. According to Paula Frolick's information from a palace contact, he is a father who is nearing the end of a serious illness and is unable to be in a room with Harry alone because the palace believes that every private conversation they have could be used as material for an interview or publication in the future. That image is particular and subtly heartbreaking. It does not imply a father who opposes reconciliation. It portrays a father who desires it and is overcoming both personal and institutional challenges that make it structurally complex in ways that are beyond the scope of simple goodwill. William, as heir to the throne and, more practically, as the person overseeing the daily Sussex relationship from the palace side under the reported autumn mandate arrangement, is the barrier that consistently shows up in all accounts of why reconciliation has not advanced. Instead of defining what is theoretically desirable, William's position defines what is actually feasible. By all accounts, he has become much more adamant about Harry since the release of Spare. According to reports, he called Harry in October 2025 and asked him to correct the public record regarding Catherine's portrayal. At the end of the call, Harry said he could not afford to undo the narrative he had created. If reported correctly, that particular exchange is the most illuminating aspect of the entire reconciliation discussion. Not because it depicts hatred or irreversible harm, but rather because it depicts two individuals making particular, incompatible decisions about what they need, and those needs not being compatible with the kind of agreement that would permit things to proceed. Something would need to shift in the storyline for Harry to have the access to his father and his nation that he allegedly desires. A retraction, correction, or public admission that the narrative presented in the Netflix documentary, the Oprah interview, and the memoir is not totally true. That's a big request. The memoir sold all over the world. 50 million people watched the interview. It would be very expensive to walk any of it back in public. William would require something that Harry's post-2020 public record has not offered in order for him to allow any kind of Sussex proximity to the royal inner circle. Not an acknowledgement between brothers in a room, not a private apology. Something that appears in the same public record as the initial assertions. These two prerequisites are true. They haven't been fulfilled. Furthermore, there is no discernible reduction in the distance between them. Because of this, the reconciliation theory has not yet shown any discernible growth despite its continuous circulation. There is a genuine desire for it, at least on Charles's side and apparently on Harry's. Neither party is currently meeting the structural requirements for it to occur. From their respective perspectives, Bozoff and Frolic have both argued that the positive press coverage of Project Thor is more akin to a wish being reported as news than a development being reported as fact. This already complex picture is further complicated by rumours that Meghan has taken a strong stance against returning to British life, at least with the kids. Conversations about going back to Britain were discussed and rejected, according to several unconfirmed accounts. The overall picture they paint is in line with everything that has been seen regarding the direction of travel of Sussex operations over the past few years, regardless of whether those particular exchanges took place in precisely those terms or not. The base is California. The social and educational environments of the kids are present. Both the brand and its infrastructure are present. There are the professional connections that make up the Sussex commercial operation as it exists today. And the idea that California would be preferable was the foundation for the entire departure. The idea that supported every choice made since 2020. It would take a different rationale than the one currently available to claim that the life created there would outweigh the costs of leaving, walking any substantial portion of that back, returning the kids to the British environment, re-exposing the household to close British press scrutiny, and re-entering any proximity to the institutional dynamics that the departure was specifically intended to escape. Furthermore, during the last 5 years, the Sussex operation has made no discernible progress toward developing that rationale. Travel has been moving away rather than toward. Regardless of what the Project Thor coverage implies, that is what the evidence truly demonstrates. That takes us back to Freedom Flight. After 5 years, the phrase that was meant to encapsulate liberation now stands next to a Frogmore cottage that is being restored to its former state. The alterations are being actively undone, rather than merely ignored. A security legal battle that has not ended in Harry's favour, an appearance in Geneva where the crowd discussion overshadowed the speech, and a reconciliation theory that consistently encounters the same structural roadblocks whenever it is put to the test against the documented reality. In its early years, the Sussex operation produced real numbers. The contracts with Netflix, Spotify, and Penguin Random House were not insignificant. These were the kinds of figures that are only written when a large institution has done its research and determined that the business proposal in front of it warrants a substantial investment. Penguin Random House, Netflix, and Spotify are not companies that write 8-figure and 9-figure contracts on a whim. They completed their analysis. After arriving at certain figures, all 3 of them came to different conclusions over the course of about 5 years. It is not insignificant that a commercial assessment has been revised collectively. It is an independent industry decision made by organisations that have no special interest in coordinating their opinions. The royal connection, the access, the credibility, the titles, and the narrative that the titles enabled constituted that value proposition. Since then, 3 of the largest companies in their respective sectors have concluded that the proposal was not what it seemed. The amounts they paid in 2020 and 2021 did not match the amounts that the real commercial performance in 2025 and 2026 warranted. The security question, the Frogmore renovation, the reconciliation theory, the Geneva appearance, and the brand performance are all manifestations of the same underlying tension, despite being distinct stories with their own commentary. Harry left an institution that provided him with a particular identity, a particular kind of institutional and physical protection, and a particular kind of embedded relationship with his family and country that existed because of the role he played rather than because of who he was as a person. The California years were meant to replace those things, or at the very least, make them seem insignificant in light of the gains. 2025 and 2026 provide evidence of a partial replacement. The pull toward what was left behind has not decreased as the departure's framing suggested it should have by now, and the irrelevance has not been attained. That does not render the choice incorrect. It increases its cost in ways that might not have been fully taken into account in 2020, in relational, institutional, and commercial categories that might not have been equally weighted during the initial computation. And the Frogmore renovation, the empty cottage, the unresolved security dispute, and the reconciliation theory that keeps failing to materialize all continue to raise the question of whether those costs can be managed over the long term, commercially, relationally, personally, and institutionally. The freedom was genuine in the sense that it was important to Harry and Meghan when they were leaving. Its institutional, commercial, and relational costs have been mounting at a rate and in a way that the initial concept did not fully account for. Whether freedom flight was the right choice is no longer a question. That issue was resolved in 2020, and those who made it are not going back. What the upcoming chapter will look like is the question. What it is really based on, now that the original commercial architecture has shrunk, what both parties need to do, whether the relationship damage needs to be managed rather than just prolonged, and whether Harry's alleged pull toward his family and country has any practical way to be expressed, given the current structural barriers. Based on available data, neither the palace nor the California operation have a viable response to any of those queries. The cottage that once physically symbolized their position in the royal world is being restored to its pre-arrival state 5 years after the freedom flight. The chapter was closed in the most literal sense possible to the renovators. The modifications were reversed and the configuration was restored. What are your thoughts? Is there a realistic way for Harry and the royal family to make amends in any meaningful way? Or has the distance just become permanent due to the accumulation of structural obstacles? Please share your honest thoughts in the comments section below. To ensure you never miss what comes next, subscribe to Royal Box. The like button is how we keep the channel expanding and the stories coming, if you are interested in this kind of analysis. We'll be here for the upcoming chapter until then. We'll be watching until then. Everyone will too.